everyone. Thanks for joining me on the Listen It Real podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randles-Friedman. This is your go-to space for LGBTQ plus news, culture, and stories shaping your lives right now. Today's episode feels different in a good way because we're talking about something that we don't always get to say out loud, which is just how much influence this community actually has. Like, not just participating in culture and shaping it, and at the same time, we're getting into some moments that were a little more complicated because not everything happening right now inside the community is simple or aligned. And I think that's important. I'm also letting you know this sounds a little different today, or you're watching this on video. I am not at home in my home studio, so I'm doing this live from a hotel room. Our first story is Meryl Streep and queer culture. So I want to start here because this one made me stop for a second. Meryl Streep, yes, Miranda Priestley herself, is back doing press for The Devils Wear Prada 2. And during an interview, she said something that honestly felt like a moment. She credited the queer community with shaping culture, not just influencing it, not contributing it, but shaping it. And she said something along the lines of, what would we even have done with fashion without gay people? Would we have anything? And I know that sounds dramatic at first, but also, is it? Because if you think about it, fashion, art, music, design, humor, and even the way we all communicate, so much has been shaped by queer people, often without recognition. And what I loved about this is that she connected it specifically to The Devil Wears Prada. Because yes, it was a mainstream movie, but Miranda Priestley didn't become iconic just because of that. She became iconic because we made her iconic. We quoted her, we turned her into memes, we brought her into drag, we kept the character alive in culture. And now, years later, the sequel is being made with LGBTQ plus audiences in mind. And that's a kind of shift, the acknowledgement, and it's so nice to see. Meryl Streep is amazing. Next, the Kylie Minogue documentary. And that actually connects us to this next story that is really in a natural way. Netflix just dropped the first look at a documentary series about Kylie Minogue. And if you're part of this community, you already know why that matters, because Kylie isn't just a pop star, she's part of the soundtrack of the queer life. Her music has been here for the highs, the lows, the nights out, the heartbreak, the healing, all of it. And what's interesting about her is how much she reinvented herself over time. And I think that's why queer audiences connect with her so deeply. Because reinvention isn't just artist. For a lot of us, it's personal. It's survival. It's becoming who you are, sometimes more than once. So this documentary feels bigger than just, here's a career retrospective. It's a story about evolution, and honestly, that's very us. And then we have Madonna, who has always been at the center of pushing boundaries. There's a new queer photo series book that's coming out that's drawing inspiration from her sex era. And if you remember that time, it was controversial in a way that made people really feel uncomfortable, but it also opened doors. It forced conversations about sexuality, identity, and power. And now seeing that energy come back through queer artists today, it feels intentional. And it's just not about being provocative, it's about reclaiming the space. It's about saying that we don't have to tone ourselves down to be accepted. And honestly, that expression has always been part of this community. Then we go to Heartstopper's finale. So some people may get a little emotional over this, but the Heartstopper Forever is officially coming on July 17th. And here's the thing, it's not another season, it's the ending. I think what hits about this is that Heartstopper wasn't just a show, it was comfort, it was softness, it was representation in a way that a lot of people didn't grow up with. And now the story is shifting. It's not about just falling in love, it's about what happens after that. Where you're growing up, you distance, you change, and that's all real. Because relationships evolve, life happens, and that's what makes this ending feel meaningful. Next in New York City, they have a new appointment. And speaking of the real world impact, New York City has appointed a Black lesbian archivist, Shawn Smith-Cruz, to lead the Department of Records. And this might not sound like a headline-grabbing story at first, but it matters. Because whoever controls history controls what gets remembered. And for so long, queer stories, especially from marginalized communities, haven't been preserved or prioritized. So putting this in someone in that position who understands that, that is a real impact. And next, a former drag performer, someone who once led a pride parade, is now calling for pride funding to be cut. And that's a shift. And look, people are allowed to change and people are allowed to evolve, but when the shift involves questioning the value of pride itself, it just hits everybody differently. Because pride isn't just an event, it's visibility, it's history, it's community, and it raises a bigger question. Who gets to define what pride means now? Next, John Waters on The View. And I just want to end this episode with something that feels very on brand for us. John Waters was on The View recently, and in a true John Waters fashion, he referred to Donald Trump as the ultimate hair hopper. And it's funny because it's also very intentional, because humor hasn't always been one of the ways the queer people push back. We don't just challenge power, we make it look ridiculous and sometimes even more effective. And the whole panel, whenever he said that on The View, got a really good laugh at it. This episode shows anything, it's that this culture doesn't just exist in this community, doesn't just exist in culture. We shape it, we influence it, we drive it, and even when we're not always recognized for it, and even when things feel complicated. If this episode resonated with you, make sure to share it with a few friends. Also, be sure to follow this episode and leave a comment or review. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll be back tomorrow with more LGBTQ plus news.